Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Caitlin Shea, and I'm a marriage and family therapy graduate student and intern at the Relationship and Intimacy Center. And I will be leading us through 45 minutes of this webinar on how to talk to your kids about sex, bodies, and consent. And I'm so glad you're here. Just to be clear, this webinar is focused on children, not teenagers. So we'll be looking at what's appropriate for younger kids, roughly preschool through late elementary school. And today we're going to focus on three main things: keeping kids safe, answering their questions in ways that match their age, and helping them feel comfortable coming to us as parents and caregivers with those questions. I also want to make a note that it's completely normal if this topic makes you feel awkward, nervous, or unsure. A lot of us did not grow up with great models on how to talk about this. So my hope is that by the end, you'll leave with a few concrete phrases and ideas that you can start using right away without any pressure or need to be perfect. Here are our goals for this session. First, I want to help lower some of the anxiety around saying it wrong. Second, I will share simple age-appropriate language that you can use when kids ask about their bodies or about how babies are made. And third, we'll talk about how to weave consent and body safety into everyday life, not just into one big serious talk. Finally, we will pay attention to self-awareness, how we actually ourselves feel in those conversations so that we can stay as calm and as open as possible with our kids. There we go. So first step, let's start with why self-awareness matters here. Kids are incredibly tuned into our emotions. They notice our tone, our facial expressions, and our body language, sometimes more than our actual words. A lot of us grew up with some mix of silence, discomfort, or even shame around bodies and sex. So it makes sense that we might feel nervous or awkward when our kids bring it up. And when I say self-awareness, I simply mean noticing what's happening inside you. So that is your thoughts, your feelings, and even what's going on physically in your body when your child asks a question. And as I said previously, the goal is not to be perfect, a perfect, totally chill parent. The goal is just to be aware enough that we can respond in a way that feels mostly calm, open, and age appropriate. How our background shows up. So our background really shapes how we present ourselves in these conversations. So take a moment to think about the messages you got growing up around bodies and sex. Maybe your family never talked about it at all. Maybe it was very fear-based or very strict conversation around, or no conversation at all. It could have also been confusing or inconsistent. So culture, religion, and family norms all affect how comfortable or uncomfortable this feels for us now. And because of that, as parents, we tend to fall into a few common patterns. Some of us might change the subject as fast as we can just to get over the awkwardness of it. Some of us might joke or laugh it off, and some of us freeze. We might swing to the other extreme of freezing by giving a long and intense lecture. All of those reactions are totally normal and understandable. The key is to just notice, oh, this is what I tend to do, so that you have a little more choice in the moment about how you want to respond. So what can self-awareness actually look like in that moment? One really simple tool I like to recommend is to pause and take a breath before you respond. So if your child asks, how do babies get in the tummy? You don't have to answer in half a second. You can inhale, exhale, and then respond. You can also do a quick check-in with yourself. You might ask in your head, what am I feeling right now? And maybe that's named as embarrassment. Maybe it's fear of saying it wrong. Maybe it's surprise. And just noticing those emotions can help calm things down a bit. From there, aim for a simple, calm response instead of a perfect one. And it is completely okay to say, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked. Let me think about how to explain it, and we'll talk after dinner. This still tells your child you can come to me and your question's welcome, while giving you a little bit of time to mentally prepare. Now let's talk about creating emotional safety for kids when we talk about these topics. Emotional safety just means your child feels that they can ask questions without getting in trouble or making you upset. One big piece is staying as calm as you reasonably can. A warm, matter-of-fact tone works really well, kind of the same tone you might use to talk about brushing your teeth or wearing a bike helmet. It also helps to avoid shaming words about bodies or curiosity. Words like gross, nasty, or dirty. Instead, we can use more helpful words like private, safe, and not safe. So instead of saying something like, that's gross, don't say that, we might say, that's a private part of your body, and we talk about private parts at home with our family. When kids feel that their questions are safe with us, they're more likely to come to us instead of looking on the internet or relying on an older friend for information. Let's move into age-specific goals, and we will focus on appropriate discussions for developmental stages for the age ranges 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 to 11. For kids ages 3 to 5 years old, the main goals are very simple: teaching correct names for body parts, introducing basic body safety rules, and giving short, concrete answers. Kids this age are already learning the names of everything else: nose, elbow, tummy, so we can include genitals in that same neutral way. We want to start using words like penis, vulva, vagina, testicles, and breasts, just like we say nose and toes. And when they ask questions, we want to keep answers short and literal. If they ask, excuse me, if they ask, what's that? You can simply say, that's your vulva. It's a private part of your body, and that's enough. For kids around 6 to 8, the questions usually get a bit more detailed. Here, the goals are to explain a bit more about how bodies work, give a very basic explanation on how babies are made, and to start using early consent language with friends and siblings. They're usually ready for a simple explanation that includes sperm, egg, penis, and vagina, but still in a non-graphic way. You might notice more questions like, how did the baby get in there? Or how does the baby get out? This is a great age to introduce books and simple diagrams, so you're not only relying on your own words. And it's a great time to start talking about asking before hugging and respecting other people's no's. For older kids around 9 to 11, we can go a little bit further. The goals here are to give more detail about reproduction, start talking about body changes that are coming with puberty, and to strengthen their language around bodily autonomy and safety. We don't have to wait for school sex ed to open these conversations. We can start framing puberty as something normal and manageable, not something scary. And this is also a good time to repeat the message that you can always come to me with questions, even if you feel embarrassed or you think you might have done something wrong. We still keep things age appropriate, but we begin laying a stronger foundation before those teenage years arrive. Now let's talk a bit about why using correct anatomical words matters. First, it supports health and body literacy. So if a child can say, my vulva hurts or my testicles hurt, that's much more helpful than down there hurts at a doctor's appointment. Second, it can help prevent and detect abuse because children are able to more clearly describe what happened if something is wrong. Third, using real words reduces secrecy and shame. If we avoid these words, kids may get the message that these parts are somehow bad or unspeakable. And finally, when we can say these words calmly, it models comfort and confidence for our kids. It tells them your body is not something to be ashamed of. So how do we teach anatomy in a neutral way? One big tip is to use a neutral tone, the same way you talk about elbows or knees, kind of like we talked about previously. We can use everyday moments like bath time, diaper changes for younger siblings, getting dressed, or going to the doctor. For example, during bath time, we could say, let's make sure we wash your vulva so it's clean, in the same calm tone as let's wash your hands. We should also expect repetition and giggles. Kids might repeat the words penis or vulva a lot or laugh just because they're new and interesting. As parents, we can stay calm and matter of fact. Additionally, we can keep explanations brief. We don't have to give a big speech every time. The same simple, consistent language over time is what really sinks in. Next, let's discuss ways to have conversations about reproduction with your kids using that same developmental guide of age ranges. Okay, so starting with ages 3 to 5. For younger kids, we want to stay really simple and focus on the basics. You might say a baby grows in a special place inside a grown-up's body called a uterus. If they ask how the baby gets there, you can say a tiny seed from a man joins a tiny egg from a woman, and then the baby can start growing. If their only question is where do babies grow, you don't need to then jump ahead into every detail. It's okay to just answer the only question that's asked. And you can always follow up by asking them, does that answer your question or do you want to know more? So for kids about 6 to 8, we're still sticking with those simple explanations, but we can add a little more detail. You might say something like, the penis can put a tiny cell called the sperm into the vagina. The sperm can meet an egg, and if they join, a baby can start growing in the uterus. It's still short and non-graphic, but includes the basic facts. And again, you don't have to give a long scientific explanation. Kids will often come back with more questions over time, and that's okay. And again, if you feel nervous as the parent here, just remember that you can pause, take those deep breaths, and say, that's a great question. Let me think about the best way to explain it. Now, for kids around ages 9 to 11, we can give a bit more detail about reproduction while still keeping it age appropriate and respectful. So an example of something you could say, during sex, the penis can go into the vagina and the penis can release sperm. The sperm can swim up to find the egg. If a sperm and egg join together, a pregnancy can start and a baby can grow in the uterus. So you see there how there's a little bit more detail than the previous explanations. At this age, many kids are also ready to hear that not all pregnancies happen this way. So this is an opportunity to talk about fertility treatments, donors, surrogates, adoption, and how some adults choose not to have children at all. The goal is to give them a clear factual picture before they hear confusing or incorrect information from their peers or online. When we talk about reproduction, it helps to keep things sensitive and simple. Some children and adults can get overwhelmed if there's too much detail all at once, so it's okay to go slowly and to keep explanations short. You can check in with your child by asking, how are you feeling as we talk about this, or does that make sense so far? You can also normalize that it might feel a little awkward. You might say, this can feel a little weird to talk about, and that's okay. You're doing a great job asking questions. And throughout, we do really want to emphasize care, safety, and respect. The fact that our bodies are something to take care of and not something to be ashamed or scared of. Now let's shift to talking about a really essential topic, consent, and how we can teach it, practice it, and prioritize it on a daily basis. For kids, we can define consent very simply. Consent means asking first and respecting the answer. We can also say things like, your body belongs to you, and you get to say yes or no to touch. It's important to practice this in everyday life. This isn't just for sexual situations. So we can model asking before hugging, for example, before tickling, before roughhousing. And just as importantly, we can show that when a child says no or stop, we actually stop. That teaches them that their voice matters and that they have autonomy over their body. Here are some specific everyday practices where we can, everyday places, excuse me, where we can practice consent. So with hugs, tickles, and roughhousing, kind of like I said before, we can ask, can I give you a hug? Do you want to wrestle? Things like that. With siblings and peers, we can coach them. We can have them say, ask, or we can say, ask your sister if she wants a hug. And if she says no, you can wave or give a high five instead. So giving those options as well. Consent can also show up with toys and personal items. So, for example, ask before you use someone else's toy, or you can say no if you don't want to share that right now. It can even show up with photos and posting online. We can say, is it okay if I take your picture? And is it okay if I share this with grandma? Um, Simple scripts like we always ask before touching somebody's body goes a long way. Next, we want to help kids understand the ideas of private versus public and safe versus unsafe touch. A simple way to define private parts is private parts are the parts covered by your swimsuit or underwear. We can also talk about private spaces like the bathroom or bedroom with the door closed, where we take care of our bodies. And safe touch is the kind of touch that helps you feel cared for or safe, like a hug you want, a high five, or a medical exam with a trusted adult there. On the other hand, unsafe touch is any touch that hurts, scares, confuses, or that someone tells you to keep a secret, especially any touch to private parts that isn't about keeping the body clean or healthy. So here are a few simple body safety scripts that you can use with your kids and repeat often. So one option is no one should touch your private parts except to keep you clean or healthy. And again, you can expand on that like we talked about with the doctor or the bathroom. Another is if anyone ever tells you to keep a touch a secret, tell me right away. And another, you won't be in trouble for telling me about anything like that. We want to say these in a calm, matter-of-fact way. It's serious to talk about these things, but we don't want to scare them. We want to give them clear rules and lots of reassurance. And we can name a few trusted adults. So if something ever feels wrong, you can tell me, your uncle, or your grandma, for example. So avoiding victim blaming. While we teach body safety, we also want to be careful not to accidentally blame kids if something happens. We don't want to put all the responsibility on them with messages like, you must always, as if they alone can prevent anything bad. Instead, we want to emphasize, it is my job to keep you safe. If anyone ever does break those rules, we want kids to know that it's never their fault. Our job is to focus on support and help, not blame. So a good response is, thank you for telling me. I'm so glad you told me you did the right thing. Now let's talk about what is normal when it comes to kids' curiosity. It is very common for children to ask questions about bodies and babies, hence this webinar. It's also common for them to look at or compare bodies with other children or to touch their own genitals. This kind of curiosity is usually about learning and exploring and not actually about adult sexuality. We don't need to label this as bad. Instead, we can label it as private. So we might say, your penis is a private part. That's something we keep private, not something we show other people. When kids touch their own genitals, we can respond in a calm, neutral way. For example, you might say, I see you're touching your penis. It's normal to like how your body feels. That's something we do in private, like in your bedroom or in the bathroom. So the focus here is on boundaries, where and when, rather than making the child feel ashamed. We want to also avoid shaming and punishing for this in general. Shame tends to create secrecy and anxiety, and it does not reinforce healthy behavior. So later you might check in and ask, do you have any questions about your body? And keep that door open for the conversation. Of course, there are times when we might be more concerned. So some red flags would include persistent intrusive sexual behavior, like a child repeatedly trying to touch other children's private parts, especially if they don't stop when told to. Another red flag is knowledge that seems far beyond their age. So, for example, describing specific sexual acts they shouldn't have been exposed to. Another is coercive behavior with peers, like threatening, forcing, or bribing another child. That is another warning sign. And in those cases, or if you suspect your child has been exposed to pornography or any kind of abuse, it's really important to reach out to a professional for guidance and support. Let's talk about those public moments when your child asks a loud question in the grocery store or at a family gathering. The first thing to do is to stay as calm as you can. You can acknowledge the question and then gently move it to a more private setting. So, for example, you can say, "That's an important question. I want to explain it well, so let's talk about it in the car." Try to avoid any shushing or scolding, even if you feel embarrassed. We don't want them to learn, if I ask about this, I get in trouble. And it's really important to follow through and follow up later, like you discussed. So you might say, "Remember your question at the store? Okay, let's talk about it now." If you did react sharply in the moment, you can repair by saying, "I sounded annoyed earlier, but your question was okay. I just felt surprised." Family and culture. So every family has its own values, culture, and beliefs around bodies and sex, and that matters. So let's talk about how to integrate this into the conversation and how to make it personal to you and your family. It can help to think of this as facts plus values. So facts are how bodies work and how babies are made. And values, of course, are what your family believes about relationships, timing, spirituality, modesty, and so on. We can share our values clearly without using that fear and shame. Some families find it helpful to use a simple phrase like bodies are good, bodies are private, and bodies are not for secrets. You can easily adapt your language to fit your beliefs while still giving your child accurate information and clear safety rules. So finally, let's talk about the beyond, what it looks like to parent just beyond that one-time big talk and make it an ongoing conversation. Like I said, a main key idea we have reviewed in this slide deck is that it's not just one giant talk, it's many conversations over many years. So we can use everyday moments as openings, a pregnancy shown in a TV show, a friend with a new baby, a book you're reading, or even baby animals. You might also build in a casual check-in every now and then with your child. So you could ask any new questions about bodies or babies lately. And then keep repeating the message. You can always ask me, even if you feel embarrassed. Repetition in this case is your friend. So before we close, I want to circle back to you as the parent or caregiver. It really helps to notice your own reactions. Do you tend to go silent? Do you joke? Do you over-explain? Just being curious about that is really powerful. You can also practice some words ahead of time, so maybe in the car or in front of the mirror, so it feels more natural when the moment does come with your child. If you do tend to get reactive or snap, you can work on repairing. You might say, "I realized I sounded upset earlier. That was about my own discomfort, not anything wrong with your question." And if these conversations consistently feel really hard or overwhelming, it's completely okay to look for extra support, whether that's a trusted friend, a parenting group, a faith leader, or a counselor. So, some key takeaways to pull together the main points we've talked about. First, start early and keep it simple. Lots of short, small conversations are better than one big serious talk. Second, use correct anatomical words in a calm and neutral tone. Third, practice consent and body safety in everyday life, not just in those high stakes moments. And finally, focus on safety and connection, not perfection. So you don't have to get every word right. Just being willing to stay in the conversation and come back to it matters a lot. Thank you so much for watching this webinar and for caring and being willing to learn more about how to talk with your kids about sex, bodies, consent, and all the things. As you think about what to do next, you might just pick one small step to try. So maybe using those correct body words at bath time, practicing asking for consent before a hug, or having a short check-in with your child about body safety. And again, you don't have to do everything all at once. Many small, simple conversations over time are what really make the difference. I've included my email address here, so please do reach out with any questions or feedback. And then on the following slides, I've included some books, websites, and resources that can help give you a little bit more language, more examples, and more support as you keep going. So feel free to take notes, pause the webinar to write some of these down, take a screenshot, whatever you'd like to do. So on this page, we do have some options of books to review with kids that help give a visual and a little more support as you go through this conversation with them. And then on the other side, books for you yourself that might be helpful. And then on this last slide, we do have some websites and online guides that might be helpful to look into. Thank you again for taking the time to learn about this. I appreciate you all. Thanks so much.